Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News Extra, broadcasting live from the Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. Talks between Israel and Hamas take place in Egypt as Trump urges mediators to move fast. French Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu quits less than a month into the job. Russia suffers power outages after Ukraine targets key energy infrastructure and attacks an oil depot in Russian-occupied Crimea. And one person is dead and more than 200 remain stranded on Mount Everest as a blizzard traps hikers on the Tibetan slopes. Now, Israel and Hamas have been holding indirect talks in Egypt today as they attempt to carry out President Trump's Gaza peace deal. Hamas has agreed to the release of Israeli hostages, but has still not accepted all the conditions of the 20-point plan. Last night, President Trump urged mediators to move fast. Here's a reminder of what he had to say regarding a deadline for the hostages' release.
Yeah, we're going to very quickly. We had some very good meetings. The countries of the world, a lot of the countries surrounding Israel, frankly, Muslim, Arab, and many others have had great meetings with Hamas, and it looks like it's working. So we'll wait for a little while, see how it all turns out.
When will the administration begin firing?
I think it'll work very quickly. I think it's going to go very quickly. The meetings seem to be very good. We'll find out. We'll let you know soon.
To discuss this and all of today's stories, I'm joined by Dubai 92 presenter Jono and Al Arabiya senior presenter Rawia Alami. Thank you so much to both of you for being with me this evening. Rawia, let's talk more about what's happening with these indirect talks which are currently going on in Egypt. What's the latest and what key issues are really going to be focused on in these indirect discussions?
So all the delegations have already arrived in Egypt, in Sharm el-Sheikh. We're talking about the Israeli delegation, the Hamas delegation, the mediators, of course, Qatar, as well as the Egyptians, and the Americans as well. The top level, the top leadership of the negotiating teams, at least the Israeli one, Ron Dermer, Jared Kushner, and Steve Witkoff, are not in Egypt yet, but they are supposed to join the delegations later this week. They will discuss at this stage the implementation of the first phase of the plan, trying to reach a framework within this week. The first phase is basically there are 3 points, major points during this phase, which is the release of all hostages. The second thing is the Israeli withdrawal, which is a bit of a sticky point because Israel has, or at least this is what Hamas is saying, that the withdrawal plans and timelines are vague. And the third issue is the humanitarian corridor. There's also another sticky point regarding this stage as well, which is the timing of the release of these hostages. Hamas is claiming and saying that it is logistically impossible to meet the deadline that President Trump has set, which is 3 days. First of all, all military operations need to be halted, which they have not, even though President Trump has called for them to be halted. Israel is saying that they are on the defensive, not on the offensive, but still bombardment and ground shelling is still taking place. Only in the last 24 hours, 24 Palestinians in Gaza have been killed. So the next stage will be definitely much more sticky because we will be talking, the delegations will be negotiating disarmament, which is a very sticky point, and governance in Gaza after the war has ended as well.
And as you said, Rawia, really sticky points to be discussed here. And Hamas has to find the hostages because they probably don't know where everyone is after we've seen this occupation of Gaza City by Israel and the constant bombardment. And we actually spoke to Yotam Confino earlier, who is a Middle East correspondent, and he managed to get into Gaza City, and we just saw the destruction of that. So let's just take a quick listen to what he told me he witnessed while he was there.
So as expected, we entered a war zone. We went with the Israeli military on what you call an embed deep into Gaza City, or at least to the southern part of Gaza City. And what we saw was, of course, first of all, sand dunes everywhere. There are no roads. It was extremely difficult to even get there. We were inside an armored personnel carrier for a long time. And then eventually when we got there, it was just chaos. You heard explosions in the background from Israel attacking Hamas. You saw buildings that were either completely destroyed or partially destroyed. And we basically saw what an active war zone is like. It was extremely dangerous to be there, first of all, because the fighting is still ongoing and because Hamas has snipers many places in Gaza City. So we weren't allowed to be outside for too long. We had to be inside an apartment block that was used by the Israeli military. So it was really a horrible sight, really, because it just once again shows you how affected Gaza is from all of this fighting that takes place inside densely populated areas. 900,000 people have left Gaza City, but it still means that there are between 100 and maybe 200,000 civilians left inside Gaza City.
And Jono, we just see the destruction there. Yotam actually filmed that and he sent it to us and we played it out, and we look at Gaza City and the destruction that we've been discussing. So I think the big question now is what happens if Hamas don't agree? And right now, do we know what their red lines are?
So 48 hours is what Israel and the US have said. This is what you need to action it by. We need progress here. If you don't, Israeli forces will push deeper into Gaza City because, as we've heard, they're now currently holding that line. So they're not progressing forward, they're not retreating backwards, they're just holding their ground. If within that 48 hours there hasn't been some progress or the hostages don't begin to be released, and as Rawia rightly said, they've not just lost communication with some hostages, a lot of these are bodies, the logistics behind having to find the bodies of the 20 or so hostages that are still there is also going to be tricky for Hamas to do. I think, ringing true to what was said on the 17th of September by both President Trump and by Benjamin Netanyahu, I think if they do not show signs that they are now willing to cooperate, the annihilation of Gaza is exactly what will happen. That is what the Trump administration said they will fully support Israel in doing. So that is the next concern. Hamas's red lines, and we've heard this, and as Rawia touched on as well, they remain the same. They've a few of the disarmament conditions are there, as well as the future governance of Gaza. These are the things that are the points they don't want to budge on. And right now, they've got a lot of support on the disarmament issue, at least, because Palestinians at large, 70% of them, feel that if Hamas is disarmed, there is no defence. Where is the defence for Gaza and the Palestinian people at that stage? Which, to be fair, if you take away weapons, what have the Palestinians got left? They really have nothing to fight with. And the concern is that if Israel don't keep true to their word, that this would be a bigger issue in the long run. So you can understand why there would be concern about that. With the future governance of Gaza, I do think there'll be some wiggle room on that. I think Hamas will have pretty much no choice in that situation. But if you are to look at it proportionately speaking, what percentage of Palestinian people, of which there are 900,000 that remain, we hope, are actually Hamas, the estimation is 40%. Israeli sources say it's more in the lines of 16 to 19,000 would be the case. 40,000 people, not 40%, would be the correct figure. So you have to reckon, is there proportional representation that's required in government for Hamas, or will Hamas just be given safe passage to exit from Gaza? So I think the red lines, although they've said this is what we won't change on, they're open to negotiation, because I think at this stage, non-negotiation is really not an option for Hamas.
And I wonder, we talk about Hamas not having much room to negotiate. They've got to come to the table. They have to get something. We've seen the obliteration of Gaza City. But I also think, Rawia, Benjamin Netanyahu is also in a really difficult spot right now. He has to make alliances. He's got to make compromises. He's come out and said to Donald Trump, we'll accept this 20-point plan. There's been a few caveats in it. But Benjamin Netanyahu actually, a poll shows that 70% of Israelis really want this war to end in exchange for the release of the hostages. They've become more and more vocal. There's been protests inside Israel, across the world. They're becoming so isolated.
Absolutely. I mean, we should not forget that the Israeli public views this President Trump's peace plan as the lifeline for the country and for the hostages. And this is definitely a big percentage of the Israeli people feel this way. On the other hand as well, so there is a lot of pressure from the Israeli public. At the same time, Netanyahu is under a lot of pressure also inside his government, even though Smotrich and Ben Gvir did not topple the government as they were threatening throughout the 2 years if Netanyahu ends the war and goes for a hostage deal. And at the same time, Netanyahu is under huge pressure from the American administration. He was practically forced into this deal. In fact, by the way, on Saturday, there were reports in Israeli media talking about Netanyahu calling an emergency meeting as soon as Hamas's response was released and before President Trump made a statement, and that he was telling his cabinet and whoever, the people that were there, and it was a very secret meeting, that we should consider Hamas's response as negative and as a rejection of the plan, and that he was shocked when he heard President Trump's statement and the praise he gave, for Hamas's acceptance of the deal and the way he viewed it in a positive light. So he is under a lot of pressure, even internationally. Israel is isolated. Okay. So, yes.
I think they're up against it. When you see the United Nations General Assembly and 142 nations say, we support a Palestinian state, surely Benjamin Netanyahu has to look and say he's got to save his own skin, politically speaking, to continue this war is really not going to bode well with Israelis and with the world at large. I think everyone said we need an end to this. Hamas have shown wiggle room, and I think the timeline process here needs to be stop the fighting. Okay, we'll hold at the enemy line where it currently is and hold the Israelis there. Find the hostages. That's the next thing that needs to happen. And I don't know if 48 hours is the realistic turnaround time. Return the hostages. Give it 2 or 3 days for that to happen. Then move on to the negotiations whereby Hamas may have somewhat of a deal. The disarmament can't happen before the red lines that we discussed are moved ever so slightly, because I reckon there's wiggle room in all of them, but it's a case of the absolute withdrawal of all Israeli forces from Gaza that needs to happen before Hamas will say, now we will disarm, because without that, they really feel they have no lifeline.
But Hamas are also under huge pressure from Qatar, from Egypt.
And Turkey as well.
Turkey. There's huge pressure on Hamas to also come to the middle ground, to make concessions, to make this work, because they've put so much work into this 20-point proposal alongside Donald Trump. And the White House, Caroline Leavitt, gave a press briefing a little bit earlier today, and she says that we want to move very quickly on the Gaza plan, which Donald Trump has said. She said Israel has been incredible in cooperating on the Gaza plan. So we see this pushing and pushing to try to desperately get this deal over the line.
Definitely. I mean, just like Prime Minister Netanyahu is pressured from all directions, Hamas is definitely very pressured, whether it be on the ground in Gaza with the mounting and expanding Israeli offensive, especially in the past few months. At the same time, apparently, President Trump has asked the Turkish President Erdogan to pressure Hamas, and apparently Hamas was convinced by the mediators that this is the best option, that there shouldn't be any rejection of the plan, there should be an embrace, yet also a tactical maneuver in order to get to the negotiations on the sticky points without committing fully to the conditions of the plan. So, I mean, at least in Palestine, in the Arab world, Hamas's response was considered tactically smart.
And I think it will just require a few days. And like you said, it's tactically smart from a terrorist organisation to come up with something like this. There will be no place for them in government. And I think a lot of people can see that as realistic. That will be the one thing would they move on. And I think the disarmament following the release of the hostages and the withdrawal of troops from Israel, which is supposed to be imminent once the hostages are released, if that does happen, I do think they'll have to, and it's not a case of this is the best deal, it's the only deal on the table.
It is, and ceding power to a technocratic Palestinian leadership seems to be the more logical solution in this, at this stage at least.
And we'll see what happens, but we must remember we haven't got this far for a long time.
Yes.
So this is
Let's be optimistically...
Yes, let's be optimistic.
Or cautiously optimistic, let's say.
Cautiously...
But optimistic nonetheless.
Yes, and, you know, all the right people are in Egypt. The wheels are in motion. So hopefully we get some sort of news in the next couple of days on those talks. Rawia and Jono, thank you so much for your thoughts on that. Now let's move on to another story. And French Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu has resigned after just 28 days in the job. The announcement came just hours after his cabinet was unveiled. Lecornu was appointed after the downfall of the previous government led by François Bayrou. Here's how Lecornu broke that news.
En ce lundi matin, les conditions...
This Monday morning, the conditions were no longer in place for me to carry out the duties of Prime Minister and allow the government to appear before the National Assembly tomorrow. The composition of the government was not smooth and awakened some partisan appetites, sometimes quite legitimately linked to the upcoming presidential election. Now, we must be able to move forward, or at least those who want to find a path for the country must be able to move forward.
High drama, absolute high drama at the Élysée Palace today. Unbelievable surprise. Many people weren't expecting this. What's happened after 26 days in the job?
Well, it's a record. We set a record. The government itself, 14 hours, and that also is a record. So that's pretty impressive. The reason he stepped down, the reason he's resigned, multiple parties in the National Assembly threatened to vote down the new cabinet, saying that it's basically more of the same. So they've just reshuffled the deck of playing cards, but the same players are still in play there as well. The last government pretty much mimics what this one was as well. Historically speaking, we haven't seen something, I mean, Michel Barnier, 3 months is what he managed in 2024, but before that, the shortest one we've had has been a one-day government in 1885. So this is something impressive for France to even do this as well. But there's been 5 prime ministers under Emmanuel Macron in 2 years, which is just a deep political, it's more than anything else, it's a paralysis of what's going on. There's nothing that's been achieved by the French government right now, but something on this scale causes a massive trigger in the markets as well. We saw the CAC 40 drop by 2%. The euro dropped 0.7 against the dollar as well. So the knock-on effect of all of this is also categorically stating that France is kind of up without a paddle right now. And whatever they have done recently has not succeeded. I find it difficult to see how Emmanuel Macron can see his position as tenable until 2027, and the continuous reiteration that he's going to remain in power. At some stage, he's going to have to back down and say, actually, I don't think I can continue to do this. I haven't got a majority. I'm just kind of picking and choosing who I'm getting to power. It seems like they're really not sure what's going on.
But what's quite interesting, actually, Rawia, we have heard that Macron has called Lecornu back and asked him to stay until Wednesday for further talks to try and break this deadlock and try and get some movement forward.
I think this answers your question, basically. This is his final attempt, apparently, at least at this government, to try and salvage whatever is salvageable at this stage. The thing is, I mean, this resignation definitely significantly is a significant political blow for Macron himself. It undermines his authority, it deepens the political crisis in the country, and at the same time puts him in front of very difficult and risky options and choices. He can either appoint another prime minister, but now we heard that he has called back the 4th prime minister instead of appointing a 5th one, which apparently, if that happens, he will be the 5th in literally since 2022 under Macron. But that also will force him to share the power or with other factions. The other option that he can do is dissolve the parliament and call for snap elections, which is also very risky.
And he did that back in 2024. So we actually saw him do that last year. And since he actually called that snap election, Le Cornu was the third prime minister appointed by Macron since 2024. And this is what's gone so wrong. So he called that a snap election, expecting to get a majority. Well,
some blame him for today's crisis because of what he did.
Yeah.
Yes,
and all he actually got was not a majority. Had to cobble together different factions, and they just
and this time
working.
It could be worse apparently because it will weaken his own party while strengthening the right. So he might end up sharing the power with a prime minister from the opposition as well. The third option is for him to resign. As you said, as you pointed out, Jono, President Macron has repeatedly said that this is not a path he's willing to take because there's a risk if there's another presidential election, the rise will be for the right, and he is trying to avoid this. I think his last bet is on the next 48 hours, possibly, to try and to salvage this government. Otherwise, we'll see. Maybe he will not hold his word that...
Yeah, because I don't know if he can. If you look at his approval rating, it's hovering around 30% right now. And also, you got to look at everybody else who's saying, I think it's 70% of the French public say the country is in a political crisis. So you think, how can he retain his position if that's the feeling and that's the thought that's out there? And is the rise of the right what the public are actually requesting and wanting right now as well? You can't have a country where their debt is 113% of GDP, this worsening crisis, the fuel crisis that's going on, and then the now concern that the government is falling apart, and say that the president is doing his job correctly. Something's wrong somewhere, and France has been in turmoil, and let's face it, for quite a long time, and having gone from being the top dog of Europe to kind of being the Greece circa 2006 and 2009 of Europe this time round. And you think, how did it happen? Where did it all go wrong for France?
And I think one of the big problems for France right now is, we've spoken about it on this show before, is the budget. This is the problem where it's coming in France. They're not meeting EU budget rules. They haven't for a very long time. What Macron and his party are trying to do is put through all these reforms in order to save money and cut down on that ballooning debt in France. And it's just not been accepted. And this is where the big sticking points are coming in.
They have no government.
They have no government. So what Le Cornu and them are trying to say is, let us pass these reforms, be it on the age of retirement, be it on how many public holidays we have, in order to save the country's debt and to save everybody time and money in the future. But it's just not going to happen. We've seen the unions come out time and time again to protest against any change. But also, it's going to be an absolutely monumental job for anyone who takes this on, because right now we speak about France's domestic issues, but Macron's been very involved in Ukraine, in the coalition of the willing. There's that one-in, one-out big immigration scheme with the UK. So France is kind of pivotal in Europe at the moment.
It's pivotal, but I don't know if it matters who's leading up that charge. I think regardless of who's at the head of France, it will still be led forward. Those have been put into place regardless. I think Emmanuel Macron has done some great things when it comes to the UK and some of the negotiations that have gone on there, and certainly in regards to the trade negotiations, he's done an okay job there. But his country still, regardless, if you take the government that's currently in place and calling back the Prime Minister and saying, right, rearrange the deck chairs, you're still on the Titanic, it's still going down, you need to solve it somehow. And I don't know if Emmanuel Macron is going to be able to do that unless he had a majority. And we're nowhere near that. He's not even going to be able to move that around.
But
if actually he does resign and there are new presidential elections and the right rises, but how do you think... Sorry, I'm doing the questioning now. How, and also for you, Leigh-Ann, how do you think what's the face of France going to be?
It's quite interesting right now, because remember we had that court case recently where they said Marine Le Pen cannot run in the next election. And that was linked to a case of suspected fraud from the European Union, using finances in the wrong way. So Marine Le Pen, her far-right party, will still run, but under a different person. The young guy, I don't know his name, forgive me, I didn't do enough homework, but I will figure it out. He is young and he is the head of Le Pen's right movement in
So
France.
it won't be Marine Le Pen.
It can't be her at the moment because of she's been banned.
But regardless of who from the right,
Yeah.
how would the presidency, the
I
state would
think
be? How do you
they'll look at the
envision
issues that they currently have, and obviously you look at the GDP and the relation of debt, and that's not a solvable issue, like Leigh-Ann said, overnight. You definitely can't solve that, and that's not going to be a one-term thing either. It's 2 or 3 terms. It's potentially a generational thing that it's going to take. The right are rising because of the immigration crisis that France are currently
and we
facing.
see that with the Reform Party in the UK, they're the right of the
Same,
government.
the right are moving up.
they're rising in Europe generally.
It's the rise in Europe of obviously of the right because of immigration, but also when France try and change something like the pension age, that's going to cause a massive outcry. You do anything to pensioners who are the most vulnerable in our society, children and pensioners are the two that you just don't touch. And Emmanuel Macron and the government had said that they want to change the pension age. That's the first thing that caused the protests and uproar in France. Then secondarily, you look, as I said, the immigration crisis, which is continuing as well. I think a right party coming in, and Marine Le Pen coming, although she can't, but her party coming into government on this, will try and tackle those charges, those issues. And I think that may be the first thing that people will see most. And it depends on what's most to people's mind right now and what French people are suffering with day to day. And if that is something like immigration...
It could be the answer then.
It could be the right could be the answer for the French public. If immigration is what they're suffering with, then fine. If it's money that's not in their pockets and that's the main concern, then somebody who comes in with a smarter budget will take the win.
But it's interesting because France is traditionally a very liberal country, if we look at that. So the right coming in France would actually be a really big surprise. But we do see a surge in the right when that 2024 snap election did happen.
Yes.
So that was something unusual because France is run by the unions, and the unions are normally not in favour of a right-wing party. So really what we're talking about here, what's really interesting is we're having this conversation. Macron hasn't come out and said anything as of yet. So Macron, you know, we want to hear from you, maybe, you know, because we're all guessing.
I suspect he will not probably for another 48 hours until sort of, you know, more talks are achieved on the new government.
Otherwise, there's a caretaker. We'll see a caretaker government of some description in place until they make some sort of a decision on this as well. But it's going to be the same players. It'll be the same game. And I don't think the French public are going to sit back for that.
No, absolutely not. But it's such an interesting conversation. And once again, you know, we mentioned the right in Europe, and it's risen in Germany, it's risen in the UK, it's rising in France. So you're completely correct. We have seen this movement. And a lot of people are saying, could it be down to America and to Donald Trump and the changes we've seen there? But really interesting conversation. Thanks for your thoughts on that. Let's move on to another story now. And thousands of Russians woke up without power this morning after Ukraine targeted key energy infrastructures overnight. Shelling and drone attacks snapped electricity cables, and emergency services restored supply. 251 drones were shot down, including one headed for the capital city, which is, of course, Moscow. So, Rawia, we've seen these attacks. They appear to be intensifying at the moment. What's the situation?
Certainly, the attacks are intensifying both ways, the Russian attacks on Ukraine and also the Ukrainian attacks on Russian oil infrastructure, as we have seen recently. Now, in terms of scale, they're probably one of the biggest drone attacks carried during the course of this war. We are talking about, apparently, Russian air defenses have, they say that they have destroyed 251 Ukrainian drones overnight. Most of these drones were shot over the Crimea and the Black Sea, and they have repeatedly targeted or hit oil refineries also, and power grids. Now, apparently, the Ukrainians have announced that it is a strictly symmetrical response to Russia's attacks or Russia's attacks on oil infrastructure. If you put it in the bigger context, it is within the energy war between the two countries, trying to target the infrastructure of oil and gas during just before winter now. And if you like, I mean, some are framing Ukraine's attacks are not just defensive, but they are also proactive, because the Ukrainians are saying that we are going to match any Russian attack on Ukraine with the same intensity inside Russia.
It's been an interesting weekend, because before we saw Ukraine's attacks on Russia, Russia had attacked Ukraine over the weekend. 5 people died on Sunday and 30 were injured in a train incident where they hit a train, Russia, with a drone. And 30 people were injured. So we are definitely seeing this momentum ahead of winter, which normally stalls things a little bit. But, you know, it was really interesting, because today Zelensky had said attacks have included domestic missiles, which I actually haven't seen before, and I thought was pretty interesting. Jono, what more do we know about this?
So it seems this program has been going on since 2022, pretty much in Kiev. Everything that was a factory in Kiev has been, anything that was used in manufacturing there has been converted into civilian factories that the military use, have been converted across to manufacture these weapons. So because the war itself, it kind of forced Ukraine to build their own weapons. And I think up until a certain point, they weren't entirely sure how much support they would have on an international level. So needs must, they decided to convert these factories to use them for using foreign firms and their technology to reverse engineer systems that they receive from allies. And then this allows them to basically turn a wartime necessity. They'll now manufacture weapons, and that's what we saw, 251 drones. The indication is that that's a mere fraction of the arsenal that is there. We are, and as you rightly said, seeing this shift from the summer offensive, which you do normally see, certainly in wars in the north of Europe, moving into almost a winter tactic that has to be deployed now. And what Ukraine are doing, which we haven't seen before, is deploying missiles that are homemade, homegrown Ukrainian missiles, and using them along with the drones as well. So it's impressive. But we've also seen Zelensky himself say that this is something that we have in our arsenal now. Ukraine is now able to provide these. And I think at a certain point, they weren't sure how much support they would garner. Where the money is coming from, I really don't know, but they've had a pretty good success. About $64 billion has been sent by Ukraine on these weapons that they've sent across to Russia. Yes, a lot of them get shot down, but $10 billion worth of damage has been done to Russia. So that's a 6-1. I kind of like those odds. They're doing pretty good with these missiles, which are Ukrainian.
They are doing really well. And I don't know if you remember Zelensky's UN General Assembly speech. I found it absolutely fascinating, because he went and stood up there and he was a sales pitch. That's how I saw it. Yep. He said to the world, right now, we are in the middle of a war. We have drone technology. We've tested it out in the field. It's a live war zone. If you want this technology, we've got it. We can sell it to you. And right now, Ukraine is actually thinking more in the finance department, because we've seen the critical minerals deal with the US, and they want these big Tomahawk missiles, which the US and Europe said they will provide for them to strike deep into Russia. That appears to have been agreed by the countries for the very first time. So things could be changing in this war.
Yeah, well, now maybe there's, after 3 years or more of this war, Ukraine has developed its own weapons technology, especially when it comes to drones. They have definitely tested them out in the field, and they are maybe in a position as well to sell them, to fund what they need to buy for this war, especially because now the Americans are saying, nothing is for free, you have to pay for it.
Which makes sense. It's $1.4 million for a Tomahawk missile. I think Ukraine will now be able to afford to buy some of these. Then you have to look at the operation that happens when the war is over. And we're currently standing at around $550 billion of damage that's been done to Ukraine. Taking into consideration the infrastructure that has to be rebuilt and everything that goes with the true cost of war. That's a lot of money that they've got to stump up. So something like this, and setting themselves up as the European leaders of missile creation, may be where they're going. And if they're having the success rate, it may prove to be something which is quite lucrative for Ukraine.
Something we've got to remember, though, I did interview a professor who was based in Moscow a little bit earlier. And my question to him was, does he think NATO and Europe are doing enough to support Ukraine right now? Are the Kremlin concerned about these Tomahawk missiles? Are the Kremlin concerned about the possible weaponry that Ukraine could get? And they actually said, no, we're not concerned, because they've been talking about it for so long and nothing's actually happened. So Moscow are still on the front foot in many respects, which I think is quite interesting.
We don't know what they have in terms of their arsenal. They certainly don't have something that can give them the range of a Tomahawk missile. That we're aware of, at least. We know nuclear capabilities, taking that aside. We have to wonder what Ukraine or what Russia actually have in their arsenal that they'd be able to fight it off against. And I think that's something that we will never know the answer to.
No, we'll never know the answer to that.
The secrecy is so severe.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's got about 1,000 miles or 1,600 kilometres of a radius on one of these Tomahawk missiles as well. That will allow Ukraine to go very deep into Russia and cause some serious damage during the winter offensive when it does.
And it's
kick off.
unlike the Russians to admit that they are concerned.
Of course.
In
yes,
such a
that's
case,
a good point.
Yeah.
But it's been, and also actually today, I just wanted to say something. We did know that Vladimir Putin held a conversation with Benjamin Netanyahu a little bit earlier today to discuss the Middle East and other subjects. So Putin and Netanyahu also had a chat.
I think this is now on the back burner, and I think certainly Israel and the peace deal with Gaza is to the fore.
Priority.
And I think Ukraine will protract through the entire winter, and I don't foresee, because now it's fallen so far on the back burner, it's no longer the priority. Unfortunately, it will continue to wage on.
But things change very fast.
Yes.
Especially
In the
with
Oval
Donald Trump.
Office.
Yes,
Exactly. Priorities
absolutely.
change very fast, so we don't know.
No idea what is to come next week, but thank you so much for your thoughts on that. And finally, we've reached that point in the show where Jono and Rawia, you've come up with a couple of quirky stories of the day. And Jono, yours is about a man quitting his job after an unexpected payday.
Well, this guy's my hero. So he's a Chilean office worker, and he was accidentally paid 330 times his salary. So about $171,000 US. Usually he gets $500 US. The company initially, when they discovered their error, said, you got to give us the cash back. Unfortunately, the guy had already resigned and left the country. At least he resigned first. He
Not
vanished
fast enough,
completely.
apparently.
Yeah, very quickly. It sparked a 3-year legal fight, which is now coming to a conclusion. The court said, it's not technically theft. He didn't steal the money. It's unauthorized collection, and he shouldn't have gotten the money, but still, nonetheless, they enforced a 540-day in-jail penalty. But the guy can't be found, so he can't serve that time. The company is trying to recover the funds, and now he's gone viral in Chile as somewhat of a dream payday story, and also a working class hero for everybody else. He's turned into somewhat of a working
Everybody's
class hero. I
wishing
love
to
this
be
guy.
him.
Where would you
Absolutely.
hide, do you think, if
Not
this
very far
happened
away if it's
to you?
$171,000. Not very far away on today's prices.
I mean, it depends where you go.
Yeah.
I suppose.
Yeah.
Depends where you go.
It was significantly higher than his wages were.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So
for
it's a
him,
huge
it's a
change.
huge
Yeah, it's 165 million pesos. So the guy just thought, you know what, I'm out of here straight away. And I got to be honest with you, 540 days in jail seems like a fair trade-off for $171,000 US. By my calculation, he's getting about $3,000 a day. That seems okay.
YOLO.
It's a good payday.
Yeah, you only live once, you know.
Even with the
yeah,
jail
absolutely. And Rawia, yours is about a new collection by Adidas.
Yes.
And that is, of course, the sports brand for pets.
Yes, we're going to see the pictures. The
Yeah?
pictures are very cute. You're going to love this story, both of you, actually. You both have pets, small pets. So apparently, yes, Adidas is basically doing a new trend. It has just released its fall collection, fall essentials for small pets, cats and dogs, as you can see. And they're trying to transform these pets into fashion icons. You have padded vests, you have track-style outfits, you have sleek windbreakers that are apparently functional because they are water repellent as well. So yeah, you can, especially for you, because I know that you are also a very sports enthusiast.
I am, of course.
So
and
therefore you can get matching outfits.
you know what? I actually looked at one of those tops, and you know the 3 stripes? I just recently bought myself a baby blue one. Pretty much the same as that. The only
crazy.
thing that I question is I have 2 dogs. My problem with my dogs is getting them in and out of the clothes.
Yeah, dogs don't like clothes. That's what
honestly, I feel, and especially here. I mean, we live in Dubai with
it's
it's so warm, it's so hot. I feel it's unfair. I mean, these things, honestly,
they don't want to be dressed up.
They please the owner, and they really make the pet miserable.
But then, for a big brand like this to spend so much money on advertising and on making the clothes, surely they've done their market research.
There must be a demand. By the way, this is the second collection.
Yeah, exactly.
This is not the first time they release a pets collection. This is the second time, which means there is enough demand.
There must definitely be demand.
But then demand from the owners, not from the pets themselves. So.
But I must admit, I used to have a little male Jack Russell, and gosh, he used to love his winter jacket. It was so
Did he though?
cute. He did. My little girl.
Did he tell you?
My little girl. As soon as I put it on him, he got so excited, and he
That's
used to
because it
like
meant
show
walkies.
off.
Exactly, he meant he's going outside.
Show off up the road, you know, with his little fur coat on. It was really cute. I don't know. Why not match outfits to dogs?
Yeah, why not?
YOLO. You only live once. But thanks to today's guests, Dubai 92 presenter Jono Hayes and Al Arabiya senior presenter Rawia Alami. And of course, that's all from us on W News Extra. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on X. G&T is coming up next. Goodbye and thank you.